Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Who tells the best version of your brand story? Surely your marketing and communications teams have that down tight, right? I mean, if you posted some content on social media, whether it was to drive sales or just get engagement, then you could get more likes and shares and traffic to a landing page than if someone with a trusted following could, right? But who really yields the most influence with those audiences that you seek today? It's a great question for brands, especially for those who continue to struggle on social media. Neil Schaefer is a leading educator and consultant in the world of digital and social media marketing. He's also the author of The Age of Influence, The Power of Influencers to Elevate Your Brand. And on this episode, we'll discuss influencer marketing, leveraging influence in both B2B and B2C, content creators and yielding influence, looking at social media and influencer marketing and the use internationally, building your own following, Charlie D'Amelio and Addison Rae, Japanese tweets, bikini models and Instagram, cutting your neon coral while shark watching and scuba diving, and a lot more. So let's tune into The Age of Influence, author and expert with an influential shark elevating his own brand on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, well, Neil, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background story and your career to date.
Hey, Shark, first of all, it's an honor to be here. I'm really
Appreciate
excited
it.
to be talking with you and getting to know you better. So my name is Neil Schaefer. There's a few Schaefers out there. I'm the real Neil, okay?
Right.
And I am what you would call, a digital social media marketing author, speaker, consultant. I've been doing this. I launched my first blog in 2008. It was all about LinkedIn. Wrote my first book in 2009 about LinkedIn. January 2010, I was approached by a few companies for help with their social media marketing. So I started a social media marketing consultancy, and I've been doing that for 10 years, right? I've written a few more books. My most recent book is called The Age of Influence, which is all about, it's about influencer marketing, but really redefining the concept of digital influence. I work with a lot of companies as a fractional or outsourced CMO. And I also teach executives at a few universities, including the Rutgers Business School and the Irish Management Institute in Ireland.
Yeah, well, Rutgers University is where you know your cousin, Mark Schaefer, who
Right.
also is an adjunct professor there. So I love this book, The Age of Influence, which is going to come in and out of the Zoom multiple times. But this is an excellent book.
Thank you.
I got a chance to read it early on, and I'll be honest, my brain shifted during the pandemic with looking at influencer marketing. So you could not have launched this at a tougher time to talk about influencer marketing. But I think it's even more as we're coming out of the pandemic, it's even more apropos to see the value of what influencer marketing can do for brands, especially for reemerging out of everything. You talk about your background in sales. How do you really look at that background in sales and marketing and how that helped you really advance your thoughts as far as social media goes? Because social media
Yeah.
is still, for a lot of people, it's either the fluffy, fun stuff or it's too direct response, and that makes everybody else unhappy.
Yeah. So before that book, or before my blog in 2008, I had 15 years of B2B sales experience where I lived quarter to quarter. I was only as good as my last quarter sales, and that was only for one day until
Yeah,
it reset.
exactly.
So, and that's, I love sales for two reasons. Number one, it was very results driven. There was a number that would be attached to my performance, which I loved, right? The other one is I love meeting people. I love getting out and interacting with others, and I find true value and just joy in doing that. So that's what really drove me. So the other part of my sales experience, though, is that I was often the country manager, or my last title was VP of Asia Sales. So when you work for small startups or as a country manager, you have to wear a lot of hats. Yes, at the end of the day, it's all about your sales, but you need to hire someone for marketing. You need to do conference and trade shows, right? Those are huge in B2B industries. You need to hire people. You need to find, office space. You need customer support and what have you. So I had to wear a lot of hats, and I was heavily involved in all of our marketing and biz dev because I was often launching businesses or sales organizations from scratch. And that really, I mean, above and beyond that, this is in Asia. Japan, China, Korea, three completely different countries, different languages, different cultures, different currencies, different ways of doing business, different values they place on contracts, right?
Hmm.
So all of that tied together gave me this extremely holistic business experience, but also very results driven, that when I wrote my book and I started getting, companies wanting to work with me, they didn't know what they didn't know. And I didn't have an agency background because that just was not part of my DNA. But what I did know, just looking at it very holistically, was these companies needed, number one, they needed some education on what the heck this all is, but they needed a strategy. And that's where I called it social media marketing strategy consulting. And that, working with companies developing strategies in a very, very holistic way, they didn't want to know, there's no fluff in that, because if I can't deliver results, then, they're not going to be happy. Word of mouth is not going to work for me, what have you. So I was always interested in what results can we drive from all this. So back in those early days, if you remember, Shark, like 2010, social media was very PR driven. It was all about reputation management. We don't want people to say bad things about us.
Control.
Exactly. That, we had the Deuce take on Maytag and what have you. And therefore there wasn't any social selling back then, right? Really what happened was marketing started slowly to take over the PR budget for social media. And that's where the budget came from. It came from marketing. So I found myself very, very early on to be talking to marketers, working with marketers, and slowly learning marketing, but in my own way, not in the traditional way that you learn marketing, really with a social media first or digital first mindset, which I think is really critical today. So that's what's really helped me. So when I go into companies, it's about results driven. I will be the first one to say we need to create a metrics dashboard and monitor what we're doing. We need to measure, what are the goals? How do we do last month? What do we want to do this year? And so it's very much data driven, I guess, at the end of the day. And I think the best marketers are data-driven marketers that look at things holistically, that understand they can't be siloed into doing one thing. It's an omni-channel experience, right? Digital consumers are everywhere. It's a non-linear buyer's journey. So there's a lot of different things we need to be doing, and we need to have this holistic understanding of how they all work together. But it has to be results-driven, and that's why it's never been fluff. It has to be action.
Could not agree more with pretty much everything you just said. It's something that I've run into a lot over the years, and I'm always interested in the battle, if you will, that comes between the person who's driving sales at a company, and they hire an external agency who has some young kid who hasn't worked in a sales role. And so it's not that one's right or the other, because the salesperson doesn't connect the same way that the social media marketer on an agency side, for example, may, if you've outsourced it, or whether it's on an internal team or not. But that conversation could not look more different. And so it becomes an argument about which one leverages it. And so you get people who put ads on Facebook or Instagram, and a lot of, I'm going to call it, again, I hate to use the word, and it's not meant as an insult, the fluffy method. They feel like it's such an insult to them to see those kind of, sales feeds, if you will, on social media. And this is not meant to necessarily debate that, but I don't think for a lot of them that they understand that it's worth a lot more to the salesperson to drive sales than to drive likes and shares and comments like that. And it's not, there's not one that's right or wrong. It's how all of them work together to the end consumer. But and I'm babbling a little too much on it, but I just find it really interesting that they look at it from such different, unique perspectives as how to engage with their audience, whether that's from a sales perspective or from a conversation perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Shark. Yeah, Shark. What I've always had in the back of my mind, the mindset that I'm working on behalf of the CEO, I'm working on behalf of the shareholders, the investors, and I need to bring value every day, right? So when I look at fluff, it's like, you're getting a salary here. What is the value that you're bringing to the organization? What business value do these metrics have? Have you thought about that, right? This isn't school. This isn't volunteer work. This is a business, for-profit business. And
Yeah.
we're getting paid salaries to do our work. And I know, what got me into all this was 3.5 months after being hired, I was let go because the corporation decided they didn't want to do international sales anymore. They were restructuring and what have you. So at any time, the plug can be pulled. And if you don't have results, you're gonna have a hard time finding the next job. So I think everybody should always be, on their toes, really trying to deliver value. And if they don't feel they're in a position they could be delivering value, or finding ways to, bring it up with their superiors. Hey, why don't we try doing this or that? But if you just take the status quo, I mean, doing social media for a business is very different than doing it for yourself. And this is the one thing I need to teach younger people, is that, you're getting paid to do this and you have to deliver value. Otherwise, it's not going to last.
Another thing you talk about it, your background living abroad, and that's always had a lot of meaning to me as someone who's lived in several different countries and I speak several different languages. But I have conversations with these friends overseas in Latin America and Western Europe in particular a lot. I just spoke with an audience in Asia. And while much of social media today is generically the same. I mean, Facebook's got a reach that reaches a third of the world, for goodness sake, and TikTok's quickly growing. It's as big in China as it is here and everywhere else. But a lot of that part is the same, but still there's a different way that businesses and the people driving social media look at it differently, country to country, or maybe region to region is probably a fair way to lop that in. But how do you look at we're doing social media today versus what your perspective brings in from what you've seen in other countries? Because you speak all over the globe. We talked about Ireland before. I mean, it's completely different and somewhat the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more it's the same. It used to be, I don't want to be the American who forces an American perspective
Yes.
when I speak around the world. That's the
Yeah.
last thing people want to hear.
Yeah.
But I will say that these social networks were developed in America.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I do believe in terms of social media, United States has been at the forefront. I will say that Europe is not that far behind.
Agreed.
And there was a point where I'd say maybe a year behind, maybe 6 months behind. In some areas like influencer marketing, I think they're pretty much on par. And you hit the nail on the head, Shark, when you talked about Facebook. Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn these days, if we were to look at their popularity around the globe, it's pretty similar. In fact, the stat I always share is in the Netherlands, I think LinkedIn's more popular there than it is here in the United States, for example, right? Twitter is like 1/10 of the world's tweets are Japanese. So, those three networks, and we can add Instagram and TikTok to that mix, right? I think where you get into differences is when you talk about more niche networks. Like Pinterest has never really boomed outside the United States. Snapchat has really never boomed outside the United States. I think those are the two big differences. But you also have, in Russia, you have VKontakte or whatever it is. Germany used to have Zing, which was a LinkedIn competitor. I think that's sort of gone away. But the big difference is really China, right? They have their own social media. They have, ByteDance is, they created TikTok, where they bought out Musically and created the American version. But China is its own, WeChat. And we know of these names now because of what the president wants to do to restrict them. But, Weibo and American social media is restricted there. So if there's any one country where it's very different, but even there, Weibo's like Twitter, WeChat's like Facebook. And so you have like similarities, but yeah, it's global in the way that we use it. And although there might be slight social differences in Japan, where LinkedIn never got popular,
Yeah.
people use Facebook like it's LinkedIn. So I'll never forget once I went to a business meeting at Sony and I got a quotation request over Facebook Messenger that day, together with a friend request, right? And this is something that blows Americans away. But I find, I do social selling trainings. I find more and more Americans are using Facebook for sales, right? It's becoming an older network. It's as LinkedIn gets a little bit more casual, Facebook in some ways, I see a lot more professional conversation. So it's just very, very interesting, but it is universal at this point. And I think that, if you wanted to use any of these networks to promote your brand in a foreign country, with the exception of China, where you're going to have your challenges, I think generally, the general things you do are going to be okay. Obviously, you want to localize for each country, but yeah, it's definitely a global phenomenon today.
Well, so in your book, The Age of Influence, The Power of Influencers to Elevate Your Brand, which is an excellent read, you do an excellent job early on talking about the ROI spend of influencer marketing versus other channels. It's always something I love to talk about a lot. So during the pandemic, a lot of the influencer marketing fell off a cliff for a lot of brands. It wasn't done well before, and I think, the pandemic maybe even exposed it. But some of that was just by nature of seeing people travel and things like that, which we couldn't do. So you released it in March of 2020. How do you look at that now, quite a few months down the road, but how do you look at that as we emerge back out of a pandemic where people are starting to get out and travel a little bit more, starting to really look at influencer marketing again to help drive growth?
Well, I think it's funny because I sort of attack this traditional way people look at influencers as
Well,
just
and
being
let
this.
me add one thing. when I don't, because I don't want to discount this. This is timely and timeless information. I did not look at this and think that it was written strictly as with some of the failures that influencers were actually making in the market. I mean, this is just as apropos today as it was in 2019.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I sort of attack this way that the media and, even marketers are led to believe that influencer marketing is all about those exotic photos at exotic travel locations, someone that has 1 million followers and you've never
Half
heard of
naked
them
girls
yet.
on Instagram.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, digital influence is everywhere. Yes, that's one part of it. But I look at, B2B companies that interview thought leaders for their podcast. That's absolutely another form of influencer marketing. I look at, I did a collaboration with FedEx and posted to LinkedIn. That's influencer marketing as well. If you do affiliate marketing, you're reaching out to affiliates who have digital influence. That's influencer marketing. When you're asking for a backlink from another website, you're trying to tap into their digital influence because Google's the biggest influencer of them all, right? So digital influence is everywhere. And there's only so many people that create content that yield influence. And therefore, we're always, brands are always looking to tap into these other people. So I think that does not change. I think the coronavirus has actually accelerated that. What you saw with the coronavirus was this immediate pullback on paid media, right? I think a lot of companies, I mean, we had the Facebook boycott as well, but a lot of companies just said, you know what, we don't know what's going on here. Let's just put a pause on paid media. And that included influencer collaborations. But at the end of the day, what drives influencer marketing is that organic social media for business is dead. You're not going to achieve, I mean, you have to do it, right? You have to have an infrastructure. You have to have credibility, social proof. For your brand, it's critical that you're out there, but you're not going to be seen. It's just the way the algorithms work. And it's more clear today than it's ever been. So if you want to get people talking about your brand in social, because after coronavirus and even before that, we are digital first, right? In digital, it's either search, email, or social. So you might be able to control the search and be seen and do pay-per-click ads. You might be able to, get email addresses, do email marketing and marketing automation. And maybe you're doing paid social thinking that, oh, okay, well, if organic doesn't reach, I'll just do Facebook ads and Instagram ads. But the problem is that it's an ad. It's an on-off switch, right? When it's off, it's off. Ads don't go viral. I mean, yeah, sometimes there are ads that get shared, but for the most part, it's disruptive. And a lot of people, do not even look at the ads. I know that they can still be effective for some companies. That's great, but it's paid media. It's not the same of people organically talking about you. And that's where I think if you want to have people organically talking, if you want to show up in conversations, you need to incite word of mouth. And if you're a big company like Coca-Cola, you have word of mouth every day. But if you're not getting the word of mouth that you think you should be getting or you need to get, that's when you need to collaborate with other people. And I classify influencers. I mean, there's one way in which the industry, and I'm not part of this traditional influencer marketing industry. I don't get money. I don't have an agency that sells influencers. I don't have a marketplace, right? I'm on the business owner side. I'm on the CEO side. I'm on the CMO side. I'm trying to help you.
Yeah. Can you hold up that Bang energy drink in the background and we'll give you a couple of bucks?
No, but I want to say, what's interesting is as I did my research, the influencer marketing industry themselves have priced themselves out of the market to the point where they go, well, we have micro influencers now. They only have 10,000 followers, which is still huge, by the way. And then over the last 2 years, they talk about nano influencers. And the nano influencers are people that have, between 1,000 and 10,000, but they're authentic, they're raw, they're real. They're not playing the buy fake followers game. They're not, playing the Instagram pod game, the fake engagement game. So at that level, I tell brands, well, if we want to incite word of mouth, why don't we first look at people that already like, know, and trust us? Have we even dug through our followers, right? And see who they are. Are there nano influencers lurking there? When people engage with us, are we going on their profiles and checking them out? Are our customers on social media and we don't know that, right? And what about our ecosystem partners? And then yes, what about our employees?
Amen.
So I like to begin with those people, because that's going to be a heck of a lot easier to incite word of mouth in a very, very authentic way. And that is influencer marketing. Employee advocacy is not influencer marketing because employees were not treated as influencers, right? It was marketing saying, here's a tool, here's content, go share. And the employees are like, WTF, right? Why would I want to share this promotional BS? When you treat employees as influencers and you have a collaborative spirit, it's not just about the sharing of content. It's also about the co-creation of content. It's also about getting ideas
Absolutely.
of how you can improve your social media. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of the revolution. I mean, every company should have this sort of brand ambassador slash employee as influencer program. And they should be investing in it. You know, Shark, one of these companies I met in Singapore that I think I talk about in the book, maybe not, but they are, you know, consumer packaged goods company. They're a huge international conglomerate. And they talked to me about, you know, first of all, we have a new line of cosmetics launching. And if we don't use influencer marketing, how the heck are we going to get the word out about it? Right. But beyond that, they're like, you know, we have these great nano influencers that love our brand, that talk all about it. We want to help them become better content creators. Would it be strange if we created a training program to help them teach them how to take better photos, better videos, better? And I'm like, that's exactly what you should be doing, right? And the only employee advocacy programs that have succeeded are the ones that provided this training. So why don't you provide it to everybody who likes, knows, and trusts the brand? And that to me is true influencer marketing. And that, Shark, is not going away. This has only accelerated the need for it with this pandemic and with, you know, needing to be digital first and showing up in social.
Well, now I agree. You're not anti-ad in any way. You're not anti-advertising. You just find that influencer marketing to you works better than most traditional advertising channels, and like you said, it can't go viral.
It's investing in people, not in Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
So there's
Good point.
The long-term ROI is very, very different. I'm all for performance marketing, right? Paid social, what have you. I think that's great. I think as a way to complement what you do and make sure you hit certain figures, it's great, right? But I just think that when you think of influencer marketing and relationships as long-term investments,
which is not what people do beyond a quarterly basis, as we both
or one night stand, right? Yeah. Because they're reaching out to people that don't know them, right? They're paying, and they're like, okay, I'll do that for whatever money. And it ends with one post. There's no long-term value to that, right? You want people to talk about you without you having to ask them to. And therefore you need to convert them to brand advocates. So why don't you start with your brand advocates?
Mm-hmm. Well, so you mentioned something earlier that I loved. I speak at conferences on occasion as well about influencer marketing. And we talked about brands releasing some control. One of the most important things I've used for lead gen strategies, though, for me, is to collaborate more effectively with, or do the best I can, rather, collaborating with an influencer. You know, put some guardrails up, but then somewhat get out of the way and let them exercise some control. This has been a hard thing for a lot of brands to accept, because your communications team at any brand feels like they're going to own the message only, and they're owning it in the external world anyway, which they're not. But how do you help guide people through that? Because that, you know, there are certain things that you have to keep on brand, and then others, to be effective, you kind of have to not close your eyes, but put up the guardrails and get out of the way.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that goes into that. First of all, are you choosing to work with the right influencer?
Yeah.
If you work with a Logan Paul, you know what you're going to get, right? So did you do the research to see the type of branding that this person has? That what do they bring in their creative juices? Are they a little bit edgy, a little bit too edgy for your brand? Or are they too conservative for your brand, right? So I think a lot of that can be mitigated up front. I think also it's part of the conversation. Because you're developing a relationship. It has to be win-win. Hey, we want to work with you, love your work. All we ask is that, you know, you include our product prominently, you don't show competitors' products, and you include, you know, some natural element. I think that is totally reasonable. It's the sort of thing, and it's funny because I sign up to get a lot of these influencer proposals, right? It's like, we want you to take a picture, you know, holding Lucky Charms in the aisle at Target, where you can also buy Clorox bleach,
right?
And make sure you post 3 15-second stories 3 days apart over the course of it's, you know, the whole idea of tapping into influencers is that they are content creators. Look, they're more influential than your brand. My Instagram has like 15,000 followers, but I will often outperform bigger brands that have like 50, 60, 70,000 followers. Because first of all, I'm a person, people relate more to people, but the content is just more aligned with what people want to see. Businesses are always just trying to promote, right? And Instagram is really where they hit, I think, that first challenge. So you want to collaborate with people that have tremendous influence, and they achieve that influence because they're great content creators. That's their skill. That's their gift to the world. Why wouldn't you want to harness that creative power? I agree, you should have boundaries, right? Because you have your own goals as well. But I think you should be reasonable. And I think you should look to harness the creativity as much as possible. Let them do the work. They know what's successful. Hey, why are they more influential than your brand? There's a reason, right? So have those guidelines. And I know you agree with everything I'm
No,
saying, but
I do. I think some of that also is somewhat the agencies as well, because I'm going to use Coca-Cola. Not as I'm not picking on them in any way. I love Coca-Cola. They can be a sponsor of the show at some point,
we all,
but
I'm a Coke. I'm not a Pepsi. I'm a Coke. So I'm with you
same
there.
here. So, but I do drink Dr. Pepper. But Coke, for example, since we use that as example, a lot of times they're going to put up the guardrails. Their agency. What's funny is a lot of the agencies are having the conversations with the influencers, and then they put out something that says we think you should do this for the brand. So a lot of times I don't want to always blame the brand for doing it, although they do own a pretty good chunk of it. But I think people think that you can engineer too much of that conversation, whether it's the brand directly doing it or somebody else telling you how to do it for the brand, and then they just miss. So, but anyway, one of
Yeah.
the things. Go
You know
ahead.
what? Yeah. The net that no one likes to be told how to do their job.
Yeah.
So, especially creative types.
Yeah.
So, the more you tell them, I mean, I get it's a necessity at some point, but the more you tell them, the less work they're going to put into it, and the crappier the content, the crappier the outcome is going to be. It's human nature.
Well, one of the things you talked about in particular that I loved, and it's one of the reasons why I really like this book, was the fact that you talked about developing out your own influence. This was in part 4, towards the end.
Yeah, the more influential your company is, the easier it is to work with influencers because they love to work with influential brands, right? So yeah, the more clout you bring, the better.
Well, so you also talked about then the number of followers that people have for brands to look at engagement with an influencer. And I'll give you an example. For example, you've got 300 plus thousand followers. That's a huge number across a bunch of different channels. You've got a broad range of channels where you can aptly get out a message out to your flock, if you will. However, there's a lot of people who have massive voices, as you just said, where you get more on. What'd you say? Where you had 15,000
Oh, Instagram, yeah.
on Instagram. You have where they just have a channel or two, and I've heard the pitches they often bring. A lot of times the brands aren't being sophisticated, or the agencies aren't being sophisticated to really understand, because not everybody's a massive agency with massive dollars to go throw at this, and that's kind of where they've gone wrong. A lot of times it's your mom and pop shop who needs a local influencer, a nano or micro influencer to help them drive business, and they're not sophisticated enough to look at influencer marketing and think, well, the same audience that Neil has on one channel is going to look exactly like the other. It's not. It's not. I mean, it's not. And that's, you're not the best example. Maybe it's
No,
the
no,
girl on
because
Instagram. It's anybody. It's just looking at where those channels really reside with where you can drive engagement for them.
yeah, I have a big contingency of Japanese followers on Instagram. So all
Exactly.
of my Instagram posts are in English and Japanese. I mean, if you want to try to reach a Japanese audience, that's great. But yeah, I agree 100%. People tune in to different networks and follow influencers for different reasons, and therefore it's the classic example of the female bodybuilder who is, the bikini company saying, we'd love to hire you to, push our bikinis, and 95% of the audience are males, right? So it's understanding not just their influence, but who are they influencing, right? Because you don't want to have that misalignment, because that campaign was a total bust.
So when you look at people trying to grow their influence today, as we talked about in chapter 4 or in part 4, what do you
Yeah.
sort of, where's the advice you give them to start today if they're not the bikini model?
Well, first of all, you're not going to make a full-time living becoming an influencer. You have to realize that, right? It takes a lot of work. Some is timing, some is luck, but very few people become full-time. As a way to supplement your income as a side hustle, maybe, but really at the end of the day, it's all about selling you. I mean, if you have a business, at the end of the day, you want to promote your business. But I think, the two most important things, well, okay, I'll say three most important things about wanting to yield more influence. Number one, people who yield influence, the way I define it is they're content creators, right? And they're showing up on social media. So pick a platform that you like the most, but the content creation, it just can't be anything. It has to be aligned with your brand. And therefore, it has to be something you're passionate about, because we don't want you starting and then stopping. We don't want you to become one of the 500,000 podcasts that starts and then never publishes a 10th episode, which
Exactly.
happens way too often. So it has to be, part of you. It has to be something that you want to talk a lot about, but hopefully that's aligned with your brand, who you are. So, I could go on on Instagram and talk about music, or I could talk all about travel. It doesn't really help me sell more of my consulting services, right? So my primary channel is my blog, right? Where and now more and more it's my podcast. I'm basically publishing once a week on both of those channels, and it's all marketing advice for businesses, marketers, entrepreneurs, business owners. So you need to figure out what is going to be the way you attract your ideal customer. What is that content going to look like? What's the network going to be? What are you passionate about? How do you differentiate yourself, like you do with Sharks as an example? And you need to show up. And there's no, you need to start to sort of build that community, right? And it starts with you being proactive and not just publishing content, reaching out to others, developing relationships, commenting, engaging, searching for people to follow. There's no shortcut to it, but over
Exactly.
time, if you show up consistently and you're creating content that resonates with people, you will build your influence. And there's four major ways of building influence in digital and social media. It's four different content mediums, right? It is text, which is a blog. It's video, which is YouTube. It's mainly photography, which is Instagram or really any social media, and then it's audio with podcast. A lot of people today fall into this photo Instagram trap, and more I'm telling people, look, the lifespan of an Instagram post, and I still have stuff that's hashtag that I get likes on from a year or two ago, but nothing beats the long-term ROI, the long-term indexability and discoverability than a blog with Google, a YouTube video, or a podcast. And I would really consider those three areas, especially the YouTube video and the podcast. I think today are a little bit less saturated than the blogging world.
Agreed. So Neil, I asked this of all my guests, and I must ask you, since you live in LA, not far from where they have a lot of juvenile great whites out off the coast, 100 yards out at most. But what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
So I have an experience, and I can say I have swum with sharks.
Good
And
man.
when I lived in Japan, my wife and I got licensed, PADI scuba diving in Okinawa, and we spent a tremendous week in Bora Bora. And so we took part on a dive that included shark watching. And the funny thing is that on my descending down, I actually had cut my knee on some coral. Coral is just
Sure.
nasty, right?
Right.
And so I have blood coming out of my knee and in front of me. And it's funny because after I cut it, I was sort of dealing with it. Everybody's, was diving below me.
Swim
So
away
I was
from
playing
Neil.
catch up. Yeah. So the divers that were, that
Oh.
were the closest, the sharks were in front of us, and everybody was behind, little coral reefs, and there was none left for me. So I had to sit like the closest to the sharks with a bleeding knee.
That's funny.
Just
But there were a
putting
lot
my
of black
faith-
tip reef sharks, probably.
Yeah, and they were saying, look,
Yeah.
these sharks do not eat human. In fact, there's a lot of varieties of sharks that don't touch humans, right?
Exactly.
And that was an education for me, but that was a real life education
Yeah.
that my wife still talks about today. But yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful creatures, and when you're underwater with them, 75 feet below, it's an amazing
It's
experience.
amazing. Well, Neil, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting, important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Bring it on.
All right. Number 1, Facebook or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
Good man. Number 2, Kaizen or Gaishan?
Kaizen. I could go either way. It's the same thing.
Well,
I'll go with the Japanese.
as badly as my pronunciation is in Japanese and Chinese for change and improvement, I figured I'd see which
Gaishan.
one since
Yeah,
you
yeah.
lived in both. So,
Yep.
all right. Number 3, Charlie D'Amelio or Addison Ray?
Charlie D'Amelio.
Yeah, and I've seen like one video of each, but they're killing it on TikTok. All
My
right,
15-year-old daughter talks about Charlie all the time.
exactly. So they're doing quite fine as an influencer. Number 4, influencer marketing in the B2C space or influencer marketing in the B2B space?
Believe it or not, influencer marketing in the B2B space.
Oh, I believe it. It's tougher, but it's less silly. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread.
Cornbread.
All right.
Cornbread with honey butter.
Oh yeah, that's a good choice. Good accent. So Neil, I encourage anybody to go get the book Age of Influence, but where can people find out more about you, your consulting business, get the books and more?
Well, my name is Neil Schaefer, so I am neilschaefer.com, Neil Schaefer everywhere on social media. It is the real Neil, Neal. And since there are a few Schaefers, it's spelled SCHAFFER. I also, obviously, the book is called The Age of Influence. It's available anywhere you can buy books. And I also have a podcast if you want to delve deeper into this concept of digital influence called the Maximize Your Social Influence podcast.
Definitely. I'll put all those links on my website. Neil, it's been a real honor and a pleasure. Wish you the best luck, and I'll talk to you
Hey,
soon.
thank you, my friend. I know we'll be keeping in touch.
Absolutely. So there was my conversation with Neil Schaefer, a leading educator and consultant in the world of digital and social media marketing. He's also the author of The Age of Influence, The Power of Influence to Elevate Your Brand. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, have really enjoyed Neil's book and how he looks at social media, influencer marketing, and the what and the how of how we're using those today. And most people are trying to figure this out, even with a COVID-19 lens. I don't necessarily agree with him on the value of ads. I'm probably a much bigger fan of using paid search, but I respect his opinion. He makes a great argument. But I often reference some of the content as fluffy versus sales-driven, and I don't mean direct response, but more sales-driven content, at least in general. A lot of marketers have not worked in sales at all. Their content often has a different value that doesn't always drive revenue. And as he said, though, if he's working on behalf of the CEO and the investors, then you have to deliver. And a lot of that, especially coming out of a pandemic, needs to be revenue driven. He simply said to ask, what value do these metrics have? And that's a good question for anyone to ask themselves. Not everything has to be sales, but you need to question the kind of metrics you've been using. And a side note to this is also that he's having to teach people today that social media for a business is a lot different than doing it for yourself. It's one of my giant pet peeves with a lot of decision makers. The value of your content, the personal content you create, is a lot different than generating something similar for a brand, not only on value, but revenue as well. A brand's logo, and we're talking corporate logos versus your logo, has a much different level and capability of yielding influence. Second, such a great point he makes on collaborating with employees as influencers. I wish more companies would treat their employees as influencers with a collaborative spirit, not just say we wish you'd go promote this because you work for us. That often creates apathy for many, and no wonder why. Companies should be investing in it, and they should invest more in their employees that way. Third, from some recent conversations and presentations of mine on influencer marketing, I'll reference something that I have to remind people over and over again as a focus, especially for lead gen for campaigns. Brands need to investigate your influencer choices well. And agencies that don't know influencer marketing as well as they think they do, because they so often say they can fix every problem, they own a big part of this. So when you get the right influencer, set up your guardrails. Tell them what you want and what you expect. Truly collaborate with them and then get out of the way. You feel like you must own the control, and I get that, but you're paying them for that kind of service that only they can bring. It's tough to let any of that control go, but know this, to their audience, people will listen to them very often more than they will to you tell the initial part of the same story. They probably create better content and they'll get more engagement. And those are a lot of the metrics that so many of you wanted anyway. Got a question? Send me an email to Kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Now go out there and yield some influence of your own and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.